Earlier today, I spoke with Captain Mark Kelly. He's, of course, the husband of former Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords, who, of course, was shot in a mass shooting in Tucson in 2011. They now run Americans for Responsible Solutions, which advocates for stricter gun regulation. So I began by asking him about the White House's claims that now, in the immediate aftermath of Sunday night's shooting, that now is not the time to talk about gun regulation.
Well, I used to say that myself, but when you see, the increase in number of mass shootings and 33,000 Americans dying every single year on average from gun violence, another 100,000 people getting shot, if after the biggest mass shooting we've had in modern American history, if now's not the time, well, when is?
Do you worry, though, that you have people that aren't listening?
Yeah, there are a lot of people that aren't listening.
That in some ways, I felt like watching yesterday unfold politically. Mm-hmm. You had the trauma of it all, but politically, gun control advocates were having a conversation with themselves, and gun rights advocates were having a conversation with themselves, ridiculing each other, but not talking to each other. And I'm thinking, boy, there's a reason we couldn't do it after Sandy Hook. And there's probably a reason we're not going to have this conversation now.
Well, we don't try to ridicule anybody. I'm a gun owner. Gabby's a gun owner. I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. I served in the U.S. Navy for 25 years. So we try to reach across that aisle, if you want to call it that, between some people that are advocating for responsible gun laws and the people that are like gun guys, that right. Often rural, have a lot of firearms. I've stood on tables in the Atomic Cafe in Bismarck, North Dakota, and talked to these people about what can keep communities safer without affecting their rights. Things like background checks for all gun sales, domestic violence legislation, gun trafficking legislation. These are things that do not affect them individually, but they've been told by a very powerful corporate interest that this is affecting their rights.
Well, and the argument becomes this, every policy argument, I feel as if the gun control lobby, if you want to call it that, and I apologize, I know the word lobby makes people angry, but on the gun control advocates, it's always legislation. And immediately, the right is able to push off legislation with two answers. One is, well, it wouldn't have stopped this one. Or the second is, but that infringes upon my rights.
Well, first of all, on the, it wouldn't stop this one. It's often hard to find one single thing that would stop a specific incident. Sometimes the background check thing would work. Often, if we look around the country in states that have stronger background check laws, there is, without a doubt, there is a lot less gun violence. And states with weaker laws have more gun violence. So these laws do matter. But I would agree with the argument that it's often difficult to find a specific situation. In the case with what happened in Vegas the other night, here's a guy who had some form of automatic weapon. We don't know exactly what the situation was. Maybe he had modified those weapons. Maybe he had an attachment to the weapon that helped him fire an auto. If you were to restrict those things, possibly this would have made this situation less deadly.
Is there ever, it seems as if in the political debate here, the gun rights side wins because they usually win these debates because they make it about their personal freedoms, individual freedoms, and constitutional rights. Is there a constitutional right in there that would protect somebody from a neighbor who's a gun stockpiler, from a neighbor who's wanting to accumulate all of these automatic weapons and potentially, while they may not do something, somebody else may use them for no good? What is the rights of somebody there? Is
well,
that
we
missing?
do. I mean, we do have a constitutional right in the Second Amendment to possess a firearm. According to the Supreme Court decision, D.C. versus Heller, what that means is you have the right to own a gun to protect yourself in the home. At the same time, in the majority opinion, Anthony Scalia said, that also means that the government has a right to regulate what that means, what kind of gun, where you can have it. So we do have the ability to regulate that, and we should. People have the right to own a firearm to protect themselves if they're responsible, but other people also have a right to be safe in their community. Mm. The life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness is at the top of the Constitution. We have a right to that. So we have a right to safe communities, and they can be safer. We don't have to have 33,000 people dying every year.
Realistically, what do you expect any advancement in your cause to come out of this?
Well, we've been fighting over the last 6 months to make sure some 3 bad things don't get passed here in the U.S. Capitol. Right. This concealed carry reciprocity, silencers, the legalization of silencers. Imagine what that parking lot, that venue would have been like if this guy had a silencer. Yeah, nobody could hear it, or very few people could hear it. It was debatable whether it was fireworks to begin with. How many more people would have died if he had silencers on these weapons? We were fighting that. What we should be doing is advancing here in Washington, D.C., positive legislation, that'll make communities safer. We do that around the country. Our organization, the one that Gabby and I started, Americans for Responsible Solutions, we've helped pass over 200 pieces of legislation in the states. This place here in D.C. is a lot trickier. All
right, Mark Kelly, I'll leave it there until we meet again. Hopefully it's not after yet another tragedy.
Thanks for having me on.
You got it.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.